Your brother will always outshine you, my dad sneered, the sound of his voice bouncing off the walls of his wood-paneled workspace. I was just standing there, clutching the document outlining my business plan so hard the paper started to wrinkle. A decade of schooling, all those late nights dedicated to getting ready for this, and he just brushed it all aside with that one mean comment. My brother Jacob was sprawled out in the easy chair in the corner, kind of awkwardly playing around with his phone, acting like he wasn't listening as our dad ripped my hopes to shreds. I'm Madeline Brown, and I've spent the last 3 decades of my life thinking I was going to be a key part of running my dad's company, Brown Technologies. From the time I was a kid, I've been immersed in the business. We talked about marketing ideas at dinner, and I spent my weekends following around the heads of different departments instead of hanging out with my friends. Unlike Jacob, who always seemed like he'd rather be doing something else, the industry was my life and my passion. I'd done everything I was supposed to do, graduating at the top of my class at business school, completing internships at major tech companies, and even becoming fluent in Mandarin so I could contribute to our expansion into the Asian market. But there in my father's office that day, none of my accomplishments seemed significant. All he seemed to notice when he looked at me was that I was his daughter, someone he wanted to marry off instead of entrusting with his life's work. "Dad, can you at least take a look at my proposal?" I begged, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "The market research clearly shows." "That's enough," he stopped me mid-sentence with a quick flick of his hand. "My mind is made up. Jacob will be the Chief Operations Officer starting next month. Really, what you ought to prioritize is settling down with a suitable spouse. That's the big hope your mom and I have for you." I shot a glance at my brother, who at least seemed a little ill at ease. Jacob was 27 years old, had just barely scraped by in his business courses, and devoted more of his attention to improving his golf game than to actual work. Yet, he possessed the single trait that held the most significance for my dad. He was the male heir. The well-known sting of being disregarded flared up inside me, but there was something unique about this particular instance. Perhaps it was the little satisfied grin my dad gave when he brought up the husband thing, or the fact that he didn't even spare a glance at the plan I'd been working on for months. A peculiar sense of serenity enveloped me as the understanding dawned that I could accomplish whatever I wanted, and it still wouldn't be good enough in his eyes. "You're absolutely correct," I replied softly, smoothing out the wrinkled pages of my proposal. My dad lifted his gaze, taken aback by my unexpected consent. "I need to be thinking about what's best for me moving forward." I set the paperwork down on his desk, pivoted, and made my way out of his office. I could hear him chuckle behind me, more than likely thinking he'd finally gotten the message through my thick skull. Little did he know I wasn't giving in. What I was actually doing was gearing up for battle. Later that evening, I found myself in my apartment, encircled by all the sector reports and market research I had collected over the years. Everything I had learned about Brown Technologies was displayed all over my dining table. I had access to vendor agreements, supply chains, the difficulties customers were facing, information that many would go to great lengths to obtain, given to me freely because they assumed I'd never actually use it against them. My father would always patronize me with a smile, saying that showing interest in the family's company was a nice little pastime. "How sweet that you're curious." Every single one of those belittling remarks had only fueled my determination to learn even more, to investigate further. Now, all the information I'd gathered felt like weaponry. Another text popped up on my phone, this time from my mom. She texted, saying that my father has good intentions. "He's just trying to shield you from the pressure," she explained. I silenced my phone without sending a reply. My mother had consistently attempted to defuse the situation, attempting to soften my father's cutting remarks with gentle justifications, yet she'd never actually confronted him, never questioned his old-fashioned perspective. The following day, I entered Brown Technologies, knowing this was the last time I'd be there. As I was boxing up my things at my desk in the marketing area, my coworkers made sure not to meet my eyes. Within family-owned businesses, gossip spreads rapidly. The word about yesterday's meeting was out. Everyone knew about how Walter Brown's determined daughter had finally been shown her place. As Lisa from accounting walked past, she whispered that she was sorry, Maddie. Somehow, her expression of pity only amplified the pain I felt. How many others had seen me putting in twice the effort as Jacob, only to see me brushed aside simply because of my gender at birth? I was almost done packing my things when my brother showed up in my doorway. He kind of fidgeted and then said, "So, Dad tells me you're going to take some time away to figure out what's really important to you." I shot back, a little too forcefully snapping my laptop bag shut. "I guess you could describe it like that." "Listen," he continued, "I realize you're not happy, but perhaps this is actually a good thing." He started to say, "Being in charge of a business is a real pressure cooker," but I didn't let him finish. "Just stop, Jacob," I told him. "The truth is, we both understand I don't actually desire this position, yet I was ready to accept it because confronting Dad would have been too difficult." My brother visibly recoiled from the honesty in what I'd said. As I exited the building, cradling the small carton of my personal items, I noticed my image reflected in the glass entryways. Something about my appearance had altered. I seemed less burdened, as though physically shedding the expectation of gaining Dad's acceptance had reshaped me. I just kept thinking one thing over and over. They really had no clue what I was capable of achieving. It was almost shockingly simple to decide I was going to leave the United States. My entire existence had revolved around trying to measure up in my father's eyes. But now the time had come to make something all my own. In just a few weeks, I'd taken all the money out of my trust, the only area where Dad didn't have any influence, rented an office in Singapore, and reserved a ticket for a single trip. Predictably, Mom really overreacted. She cried into the phone, "How can you just desert your whole family like this?" she wailed. "Your father is never going to let this go." I nearly chuckled at that thought. It felt like admitting guilt if I offered forgiveness, and for once, I knew without a doubt that I was blameless. The true shock was my paternal grandmother making an appearance. The evening before my departure, she came to my apartment, her small figure practically vibrating with resolve. "According to her, your grandfather would have been disappointed, although not for the reason I had been anticipating. She felt that the person your father had become would bring shame. The essence of that company was built on fresh thinking, not on following well-worn paths." She then pushed a weighty envelope into my outstretched hands. It contained all the insights I required regarding my grandfather's initial concept for Brown Technologies, including his private diaries and initial strategic documents. He used to say that daring pioneers are the ones who will ultimately shape what comes next, my grandmother informed me. Demonstrate to them exactly what that signifies. The initial period in Singapore was a whirlwind of gatherings, intense coding periods, and evenings without any rest. I was able to pinpoint the most critical flaw in my father's business strategy, which was their antiquated method of overseeing the flow of goods. In contrast to Brown Technologies' reliance on conventional connections and handling things by hand, I found myself constructing something groundbreaking, a platform propelled by artificial intelligence that was capable of forecasting market fluctuations and streamlining stock levels instantaneously. My team expanded at a rapid pace. I brought on board the most gifted individuals I could locate, those who recognized the capacity to shake up an industry stubbornly clinging to old methods. The office space we used was pretty tight and the AC wasn't great, but honestly the atmosphere was incredible. Each day felt like we were getting closer to releasing something game-changing. We had our first big win about half a year in. An influential investor in the tech world noticed our prototype, and she instantly understood its possibilities. In our presentation, she remarked that this had the potential to completely reshape the business. How quickly could we expand? With the finances sorted, we sped things up. Each flaw that I noticed at my dad's business gave me a chance to come up with something new and better. While it took Brown Technologies several weeks to fulfill orders, our setup could do it in just a few minutes. Their hands-on method of ensuring quality became our streamlined, automated process. The old-fashioned structure they had became our open and dynamic teamwork. I never brought up how I was connected to Brown Technologies. As far as everyone else knew, I was simply a tech startup founder with a dream. But late at night, looking at the reports showing our growing chunk of the market, I let myself grin a little. My father was about to learn a very costly lesson in his fancy office about the danger of not taking his daughter seriously. A year and a half after I left, my company, Novatech Solutions, was what everyone was talking about in our line of work. Our innovative platform was completely transforming how companies managed their supply routes, and businesses were rushing to incorporate what we offered. Each triumph felt like a win for me, particularly when I came across articles detailing Brown Technology's difficulties in competing with the baffling new force in the industry. I was actually in a meeting with the board when I initially laid eyes on the statistics that set my pulse racing. As it turned out, Brown Technologies had suffered a 30% loss in their Asian market presence, and their stock value was taking a nosedive. My dad had always taken pride in personally connecting with people when doing business, though that just didn't cut it in the current digital landscape. Businesses were after streamlined processes, not favors done on the golf course. Our head of sales proudly declared that yet another business from Brown's collection of clients had ditched our rival's system in favor of ours. That makes 5 this quarter alone. While the team burst into cheers, I made sure to keep my face blank. They were oblivious to the fact that their celebration was about my father's collapse, and I fully intended to keep them in the dark. Later that night, sitting in my office with a view of the Singapore cityscape, I saw that Jacob had sent me a text. Even though we hadn't talked since I left, I can't say that I was surprised that he was getting in touch now. He texted me saying that Dad's losing it. He continued, saying that the board is pushing him to update things, but he refuses to listen, saying he won't be pushed around by some inexperienced business. I chose not to reply, though I couldn't help but smile at the strange situation. The man who spent so much time pushing me to become the daughter he wanted me to be was now being compelled to shift his ways by the very person he'd previously overlooked. The feeling of triumph was even better than I had expected. News arrived the following morning that rocked our workplace to its core. It seemed Brown Technologies had revealed plans to obtain up-and-coming tech companies as part of a forceful growth plan. It was just like him to try and spend his way out of a difficult situation. That was a typical maneuver from him. "They're coming after us," my CFO cautioned during our unscheduled meeting. She was correct. We were simply too significant to be overlooked. Before long, we got the initial communication from Brown Technologies Acquisition Group. The proposed deal was quite substantial, eclipsing what our business was theoretically valued at. My leadership group was overjoyed, seeing it as a confirmation of all of our hard work. My COO claimed, "This is an amazing opening." We would immediately gain the ability to expand across the world. However, I had been anticipating this situation for too long to concede at this point. I instructed them, set up a meeting. "I want to take the reins on this myself." My team seemed taken aback. I generally stayed away from conversations about acquisitions. Regardless, they didn't challenge my choice. They had come to put faith in my gut feelings, even when they didn't comprehend them. They had no idea that I was at long last prepared to show them my true self. That evening, I found myself on my balcony, observing the city lights shimmering like distant stars. I pondered the day I had actually departed from my father's workplace. Reflecting on those countless nights, I spent second-guessing myself, questioning whether I was doing the right thing. Now my supposed blunder was worth a small fortune, and the father who had never had faith in my abilities was on the verge of discovering precisely what he had forfeited. My phone vibrated once more. Another text came in from Jacob. "He claims he has to personally manage this one," Jacob wrote. "Dad's arranging to travel to Singapore himself for the acquisition conference." "Wonderful," I mused, setting my phone aside. The day of the appointment came with a palpable strain that electrified our modern office surroundings. A sharp difference when compared with my father's classic mahogany office. When my father came in, accompanied by his consultants, I relished the instant before he recognized me. He surveyed the room with the haughty self-assurance I knew so completely until his eyes stopped on me, sitting serenely at the head of the table. The blood completely disappeared from his face. "Madeline?" "Greetings, father," I said, trying to remain calm. "Please have a seat, we have a great deal to talk about." His team of advisors shared bewildered looks as my dad remained motionless in the entrance. I could tell he was having a hard time wrapping his head around what was happening. His daughter, the one he had so readily disregarded, was now occupying the seat of power. "What is this supposed to be?" he questioned, his surprise morphing into fury. "What exactly are you trying to pull here?" "It's not a game," I responded, pointing to the presentation displayed on the screen behind me. "It's merely business, plain and simple. My company is Nova Tech Solutions. I started it, nurtured it, and transformed it into the dominant force in the market that you're now frantically trying to buy. The quiet in the room felt overwhelming. My team observed with amazement in their eyes. For a lot of them, this was the first they were hearing about my relationship to Brown Technologies. My father's team members were quietly and quickly conferring with each other, likely understanding the significance of this disclosure. "That's not possible," my father blurted out. "There's no way you could have. This can't be. What's not possible?" I inquired, displaying charts showing our company's progress. "That I came up with a solution that's completely changing the industry, or that I did it all on my own?" One of his advisors spoke up. "Ms. Brown, irrespective of your familial ties, we've come to talk about a serious matter of business." "Absolutely," I said with a smile. "Let's talk about how my firm has managed to secure 40% of the Asian market. Or maybe you'd prefer to discuss how my AI-powered system completely wiped out your business approach." At last, my dad spoke. "Is your aim to ruin me, your own flesh and blood?" "No," I answered, my grin disappearing. "I took this action because you instilled in me the belief that my gender prevented me from leading an organization. So, instead, I started my own. It surpasses yours in every conceivable aspect." His complexion turned crimson. "Tell me how much you want," he uttered roughly. "Everybody's got a price." I rose to my feet, adjusting my jacket. "You're mistaken, Dad. The point is not financial gain. It was never about money. This business represents my lasting impact, the one you wouldn't allow me to create in partnership with you." I made my way around the table until I was standing squarely before him. "I am refusing your proposition." "You can't do this," he said, his tone now lacking its former strength. For once in my life, I witnessed alarm in his gaze. "I already have," I responded. "This meeting is over." As my father angrily exited the meeting space, his face flushed with anger and shame, I felt a burden release from me. His assistants hurried after him, abandoning their untouched presentation materials, those stylish dark binders bearing the Brown Technologies emblem I was so accustomed to. My CFO stated, shattering the shocked quiet that filled the room, "That was quite a surprise. It seems you're Walter Brown's daughter." I pivoted, looking directly at my team, the individuals who had put their faith in my idea, even without knowing all the details of my past. More than just who I am on paper, I see myself as the CEO who is determined to expand this company internationally. Those following weeks passed by in a dizzying rush. The media got wind of my background, and pretty quickly, every business-focused publication wanted to publish my story. "Tech heiress challenges her family's business" became the most popular headline for that entire month. My inbox became completely overwhelmed with new messages. Past coworkers, friends of the family, and even my own mom were all reaching out, trying to figure out how the obedient daughter had morphed into a competitor. I gave Jacob's message my undivided attention, reading every word. "I always suspected you were more skilled at this than I was. If it means anything, I regret not telling you that before," he wrote. My grandmother requested that I join her for tea at her go-to spot, the very same place she used to bring me as a kid. She had a gleam of joy in her eyes as she finished reading the most recent article detailing Novatech's accomplishments. "Your grandfather would have been thrilled by this," she remarked, as she gently put her teacup down. "He created that company with the conviction that innovation held greater significance than maintaining traditions. Your father lost sight of that, but you remembered." Experts examining the market forecasted that Brown Technologies would need to undergo major overhauls to remain viable. It was being said that my dad was facing pressure to relinquish his position. The board of directors desired a fresh, youthful leader, somebody capable of updating the company before the situation became irreversible. The truth is, the family business didn't hold any interest for me anymore. Novatech was making inroads into the European market, and our team was creating innovative functionalities that would transform the industry even more dramatically. My colleagues were enthusiastic, driven, and most importantly, felt appreciated regardless of their background. One night I was poring over the expansion strategies in my workspace when my secretary announced someone. "Your dad wants to have a word," she told me. I thought about refusing to see him, but changed my mind. I wanted him to witness the accomplishments his daughter had achieved independently of his guidance. He came in hesitantly, looking out of place in this environment that was so unlike his old-fashioned workplace. "Madeline," he said, and his tone sounded less commanding than I remembered. We have to chat, he confessed. What about? I questioned him, and I didn't bother to offer him somewhere to sit down. Is this related to professional stuff or personal stuff? Both, he responded. The executive committee is asking that you return to be at the head of Brown Technologies' digital conversion, he explained. I let out a chuckle that bounced off the glass enclosures. You still don't understand a thing, do you? I didn't create this venture to demonstrate something to you. I started this venture because I was capable of doing so, because I possess the skills required to do this work. Your validation doesn't mean anything to me anymore. His reaction to my statement was a wince, and he finally realized the consequences of his choices. It wasn't only about losing market dominance or monetary worth, but losing a daughter who had once been willing to give him everything she had. I think it's time for you to leave, I suggested softly. Tomorrow, I'm scheduled to meet with some folks who invest in European ventures. After he departed, I found myself heading over to the window and gazing out at the cityscape illuminated at night. Somewhere amidst that sprawling urban landscape, there was certainly a young woman being told she wasn't capable of something simply because of her identity. I kept my fingers crossed that she would also defy their expectations. The narrative of how I achieved sudden success became a well-known tale throughout the tech industry. What the news articles didn't really convey were all the less noticeable accomplishments that came afterward. Brown Technologies' stock value kept dropping as more and more clients decided to go with our platform instead. Eventually, my father's board of directors finally decided to intervene, pushing him into retiring before he planned to, which was a level of shame he simply couldn't deal with. He withdrew into his estate, unwilling to confront the very industry that had once held him in such high regard. At the same time, Novatech was really taking off. Our expansion efforts in Europe went far beyond what we had initially predicted, and our team of developers was launching new innovations more quickly than the competition could keep pace with. The office hummed with excitement and new concepts, creating the kind of collaborative setting that I had always hoped to establish back at Brown Technologies. One morning, my grandma made a trip to see our headquarters in Singapore. As I gave her a tour, introducing her to all the people on my team and showing off our newest tech, she gently squeezed my hand. "I've got something here for you," she commented, as she pulled out a leather journal that looked well used. "These are your grandfather's notes from back when he initially launched the company." She opened it up to a page she'd marked, gesturing toward a section that was underlined. "What you truly leave behind to the world isn't something that's simply handed down. You have to earn it through how you see things and how hard you work." She told me that my dad understood, from the very day he started at the company, that being innovative takes more than just being born into the right family. Those words really resonated with me. I'd spent so many years trying to earn my spot in my father's story, without realizing I needed to make my own. Now, being in my own business and having people around me who valued my skills, and not just my family name, I finally grasped what true accomplishment felt like. The industry that had once brushed me off as just Walter Brown's kid now recognized me as Madeline Brown, the innovator who completely reshaped supply chain management. I had earned that acknowledgement at every point along the way. Half a year after my father stepped down, Novatech put on a worldwide technology conference in Singapore. Key figures in the field from every corner of the globe came together to talk about what the future holds for supply chain management. I stepped up to the podium to give the main speech, with my grandmother smiling with pride in the first row. I told the filled room that innovation isn't about just doing things the way they've always been done. It requires having the nerve to question them. The situation was pretty ironic when I announced our newest advancement, an upgrade that would make older systems, like those at Brown Technologies, entirely out of date. Jacob came up to me after the summit during the party. He seemed changed, more down to earth, and somehow more real. "I let go of my stake in Dad's business," he admitted, and then launched a little sports training enterprise. "Honestly, I think this is the happiest I've ever been." I gave a small smile, seeing how we'd both managed to discover our own versions of liberation. By deciding to go his own direction, he'd broken free from the expectations our father placed on him, whereas I'd basically surpassed those same expectations and come out on top. Mom still sends the occasional text, hopping to smooth things over between Dad and me. What she doesn't seem to get is that there are some connections that just shouldn't be revived. I've come to terms with that situation. in the same way that I've come to terms with everything I've been through. Nowadays, whenever I get asked for advice by up-and-coming business owners, I tell them what I truly think the key to my success is. Don't ever let anyone else decide what you're worth. The ultimate way to get back at people isn't by showing them that they were wrong about you, it's by validating your own beliefs about yourself. And Dad? Last I knew, he's spending his days in his office, sitting among the mahogany walls that bore witness to what I think was his biggest blunder, thinking that his daughter wasn't capable. It turns out that the lessons that cost us the most are sometimes the ones we only figure out when it's too late.